I wish to acknowledge the custodians of the land, the Kulin nations where I live and work. I pay my respects to the elders past and present. I acknowledge and respect the importance of our collective continuing culture and the importance of cultural practice within all aspects of society. I recognize and respect the cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land and the importance of cultural foundational practice. This is not only important to the people of the Kulin nations, but to all First Nations peoples and communities Australia-wide. I would like to acknowledge that we are holding space on Aboriginal land and recognise the strength, resilience of my people and my community. Sovereignty has never ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Oh my, go live. Absolutely live, going all out. And it's us. Welcome. This is the first episode of Conversations with Shalina, and I have a very, very, very special guest with me, LJ Kaur. I thought we'd get straight into it off the bat with something very important that we need to talk about, and it's about relationship counselling and why people don't want to go, the taboos around it, just conversations that I feel like they need to be had because I don't always see people having that chat. And who better than to have Ms. LJ in the house talking about things that matter. So thank you so much for joining me on episode numero uno. I think that's how you say it. Trying to speak another.
I'm having like a massive problem with the audio.
Oh no, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but it's like, try again, speak now.
Today is a very special day.
Okay, we'll work through it.
All right, so can you tell everybody who's watching who you are, what you do, and what is your passion? What are you doing in your life?
So my name's LJ. I'm a proud Kondamuka and Wiradjuri woman. For the past 5 or so years, I've worked in human services. I'm a mental health practitioner. I consider myself a feminist, a women's rights activist. I'm really passionate about working with my community, about creating self-determination, educating people around family violence, supporting families to reconnect, and most importantly, decolonizing social work and support services to help not only my people but all people of color.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And we met at during the weirdest way as well. You were doing a live on another channel, and you and I met, and I think destiny has really a weird way of
getting like an instant bond.
Yes, absolutely. So when we're talking about, relationships and relationship counseling and things like that, what do you think makes a good relationship?
Well, I think it's not what you see in the movies. I think that's a really a fantasy world of what relationships are. I think in order to have a good relationship, you need mutual respect, trust, open communication. You need to have your own goals, mutual goals, and you need to be able to respect and build each other up. I think you need honesty, commitment, support, attraction. But mostly you have to work on it. Relationships aren't easy, no matter what Bollywood or Hollywood might tell you. They're actually a lot of work, and to keep a relationship healthy, you always have to work at it. It's not something that just happens overnight. It involves compromise, communication, being flexible. There are
Yeah.
lots of facets to a healthy relationship.
Yeah. As you said with the Bollywood and Hollywood thing, I think they make you idealize relationships that are not exactly always existent, or they normalize things in a relationship that shouldn't happen. You know, especially with Bollywood, they normalize the treatment of women. Sorry?
That consent is optional. Yeah. If you harass a girl enough, she'll just instantly fall in love with you.
Oh my God. And you know, people are brought up with that mentality then, and they literally think that, oh, in order for me to get the girl, I'm just going to keep running after her, keep running. And it's like,
no matter how many times she says no, I'll just keep chasing until I wear her down. And then I think in Hollywood, they have this idea that in order for a relationship to be perfect, no one ever argues, no one ever disagrees, and if your partner doesn't like something about you, just change it. Change your appearance, change your attitude, your values, be exactly what they want, and that'll make the relationship last.
Oh, it's
and you know, all of these things are not only terrible advice and unrealistic. I think they can lead to some really dangerous aspects in relationships.
Yeah, and I think that people sometimes, I think they rush in a bit too soon, because I watch Home and Away, right? Everybody, yes, I'm that girl who loves watching Home and Away, Judge Away, and they're showing a couple who have not even known each other for 3 months. They're already getting married, and I'm just like, I'm not sure how I feel about this, because I feel like,
look, I definitely can't speak too negatively about this, because I married my husband after 6 months.
6 months is still 6 months. I feel like that's still all right. I think I could marry after 6 months.
You know, in retrospect, I mean, did we maybe rush into things? Yeah. Had we maybe gotten to know each other better, discussed our values, discussed what we wanted out of life, things might have run a bit smoother for us. I think that even if I look at myself back then at 25, I was definitely under this impression that you find a person, you know, they're the one, you get married and everything just, you know, what's his name? Shah Rukh Khan comes out and like sings this Bollywood song, and you know, there's flowers and dances, and you know, everything's magical.
Trees and dances, and they all just start like going all.
It's just instantly perfect, but it's not like that. You know, there are lots of pressures in a relationship, especially at the beginning, because you're getting to know someone, and you also want to show them the best version of yourself. No one goes into a relationship and is like, this is me having a mental health crisis. You know, you show them the best version of yourself. And the downfall of rushing into a relationship is that, you know, you've already made this big commitment like marriage, and then they're seeing you at your worst. And that can be challenging. You also don't know a lot about the person's values, their future aspirations, and how they see the world. We all see the world so differently. And when you rush into a relationship, you're not necessarily having those hard conversations right from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also happens when there's a forced or arranged marriage. You don't have time to find out about them and the pressures of parents. But that's another topic for another day. So what, in your opinion, what do you think, you know, makes a healthy relationship? Like if somebody asked you for advice or your opinion on this, what would you say?
So for me, I mean, my relationship's had a lot of ups and downs, but, you know, as I get older, my kids get older, I think, you know, what is important to me and how do I make my relationship strong and lasting? I think that it's important to make your relationship with your partner and your family and your children a priority. That means working on it. You know, when there's a problem, talk about it. When there are issues, you know, be open and transparent. Be honest with each other. A good relationship starts with communication. I also think, and this is something I'm still learning, I'll admit, is that our health, our mental health, our physical health, our well-being is actually our responsibility. When we're in a relationship with someone, whether you're the man or the woman or same sex or whatever, the other person is not responsible to make you happy. They can be a part of your happiness and they can be a part of improving your life, but they can't actually be responsible for it. And I think that definitely in Hollywood, we see that, you know, the man comes into the girl's life or the girl comes into the man's life and everything all of a sudden is fixed. All of her problems are gone. From experience, that's definitely not how it works. You have to actually continue working on yourself and stay healthy. You know, we can't expect our partner to carry our load for us or fix our problems. That's not a real thing. I think it's really important to be present in your relationship. You know, make the time to have that 5-minute conversation, to check in, see where you're at. That's how you know if something's not going wrong, or that's how you know if you need support, and be open to have those discussions. I think that a healthy relationship is not just the good times, it's the bad times, and it's being able to acknowledge when there is a problem and when you do need help.
Yeah, absolutely. I was one of those people that relied on, I guess, my partner to fill voids that weren't there. So I know myself, I've been guilty of doing that. And sometimes it happens so consciously, but other times it's subconscious. And as I got older, it was like, wait a second, I don't have a dad, but I can't be expecting my husband, future husband, whoever he is, to be like that, or to carry on that process, that role. I think the word I was looking for.
Definitely. I mean, like I have a very precarious relationship with my father and my stepfather, and you know, I definitely expected when I got married that my husband would just fix all of the problems, all the issues with my self-worth and self-esteem. You know, he would just somehow magically like fix all of them. And he'd, you know, replace all of the bad experiences I'd had with men in the past or in relationships. He'd just come in on his white horse and fix that. But I think that that's definitely not how it works. And that actually is like a surefire way to destroy a relationship, I feel. But we're not, as women, we're not taught that. We're taught subconsciously through societal norms that, you know, we get married and the men fix everything. You know, they just make our life complete. We procreate and, you know, it's done. We've fulfilled our existence. But it's actually not how it works. And in terms to have a healthy relationship, we need to have our own goals. We need to be happy with who we are. For me, that's studying, that's having a good job, that's having friends, doing things like this. You know, that's what keeps me happy, which means then I'm happy within my relationship. But if you're not happy with yourself and you don't love yourself, you can't expect to be able to love someone else. And, you know, I think that in those situations, and I've been here as well, you assume that the other person can fill all of those buckets for you, and it's just not possible.
No, it's not. And I do think that women have already been taught their role of what they're supposed to be like in a relationship. They're supposed to take whatever crap there is, or they're told that, well, men aren't going to voice their opinion, so you just take it when they're quiet, let them be quiet, and you don't talk about feelings. I know this is what it's like in some Indian marriages as well, and I totally don't agree with that. Like, and I think that it's causes of so many problems in a relationship. Yet nobody wants to go to counselling.
You know, I think that that's an issue. You know, definitely in different, like in Indian culture, being that I'm married to a Punjabi, but I think overall, I mean, there's definitely this pressure for women to be the one that reforms, be the one that changes. If there's a problem in relationship, well, you either fix it or you ignore it, or you become the flexible one. You change yourself to fix that problem. But, you know, that's temporary, and it also creates resentment. If you're changing yourself all the time to make someone else happy and to make your relationship happy, you know, by the end of it, do you even really want that relationship? Probably not. You know, and I definitely think the stigma around relationship counselling is a real thing. You know, for everyone, it's seen as a failure or just something you don't do, even though it's actually really a practical step to keep your relationship.
Well, I mean, if you have a problem in your own mind, in your own personal life, you know, you would think people are going to go to counselors, to psychologists. I go to a psychologist. I'm going to be seeing a counselor soon for my own thing. I'm not even ashamed to admit it, because I want people to know that it's normal. It's normal. Like, normalize therapy, normalize getting help. You're trying to fix something. You're not
normalize mental health. Like, when someone has cancer or diabetes, we don't shame them for going to the doctor to get help. So why do we still continue to shame people for seeking mental health support and relationship counselling supports? If your car's broken, you take it to the mechanic. You get some help fixing it. You don't just try and fix it yourself and hope for the best.
I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And I think that's one of the main problems, that I feel like people more so are scared to tell people they're going to counselling rather than going.
Judgment. It's that your relationships failed, or for women, what did you do wrong? What are you not doing enough of? You know, did you not attentive enough? You know, I think it's definitely seen for women as a failure of being able to hold a relationship, and then for men it's like, well, maybe they're not providing enough, or that, you know, like it challenges that toxic masculinity, and it challenges those ideas of femininity and what is a woman's role within a relationship.
Absolutely. And when it comes to like what makes a relationship healthy, I believe that it's also talking your goals out before you even maybe commit to being in a relationship. Like, what if my future partner, wherever you are, Romeo, I don't know where he is, but I swear he must be somewhere. What if his plan is to go traveling in 6 months and that's not my plan? That's already going to cause a clash. And I think even things you think are not important to speak about before a relationship are actually the most important things to speak about.
And I think it's about being transparent. Yeah. You know, if you're with someone and you want 10 kids, you know, that's something you maybe want to talk about, like not on the first day, but if it's getting serious, or, you know, if you want to go traveling, or you don't want kids, or, you know, you have really strict ideas about like the traditional values of gender roles in relationships. Like these are things we need to normalize. Like it's no good if, you know, a week after you get married, you're all of a sudden like, oh, by the way, I don't like kids anymore. Or like, I just said that so we could get married, and, you know, now I've changed my mind. These kind of things can be really damaging to the relationship, especially when it's just starting.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I can't imagine how challenging it must be when you're having an arranged marriage, or you know, a forced marriage is a whole other thing, but, you know, at an arranged marriage, you don't even get to have these conversations half the time, and then all of a sudden the expectations for you in the face. Well, that's true. Your parents have probably already had these conversations.
Well, they seem to know who you should marry and what your goals are. Apparently, they've probably made it up in their own mind. They've told the future husband or wife that this is what my child's doing. I hate arranged marriages when the people have no choice. Like if somebody introduces me to something, that's different. But when there's no choice,
I'm all for arranged marriages as long as there's choice and consent. You know, I think that they're a traditional value that and practice that I don't really get to have an opinion on. But as a mother, and, you know, I have daughters, and you know, I'm married to a Punjabi, and I'm sure that at somewhere along the line, arranged marriage is going to come up in our household. Yeah. For me, it's about consent. If my daughter comes to me and says, yes, I want an arranged marriage, you know, then we sit and talk about that as a family. But ultimately, it will always be her choice. Whether she chooses to walk away the night before, or she changes her mind, or she goes through with it. Consent is key. We live in a world that is ever changing, and that has to be the basis of any relationship that you have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think consent is a whole other topic, because there are so many people try and weave their way around consent and try and find loopholes. And that really irritates me. So we talked about what sort of makes a good relationship, or, you know, what makes it healthy, you know, communication, respect, trust. What would you say are some of the warning signs of an unhealthy relationship? What in your opinion?
Red flags.
Yes, red flags, warning signs.
I think there are a lot of red flags, and I think that there are ones that you see perhaps before a relationship is getting serious, like when a relationship is forming. But I think that once you're in a committed relationship, the red flags might be a little bit different. For me, I think that it comes back to communication and how you're communicating with your partner. So if you feel like, you know, everyone has disagreements, that's normal. You know, disagreements don't always have to turn into an argument. They don't have to always be placing blame on each other. Like, everyone disagrees in every relationship we have. It's just how we do it. So if you find yourself maybe everything's turning into an argument, you know, you're having to justify your point of view to the point where, you know, you're feeling like you're not allowed to have a voice, or you're not being heard. You know, that's probably a red flag. I think if you find yourself justifying bad behavior, I think that's also a really big red flag. If you're like, oh, well, he just said this bad thing just this one time, but he's stressed at work or he's angry, or he's had a hard time, like justifying constantly bad behavior, that can be a really big red flag. It's definitely where you probably want to start thinking about, what do I want out of this relationship? Another red flag, especially for me as someone who's married, is when your partner doesn't want to talk through issues, is just refusing to talk through issues. You can't start addressing problems you might be having in your relationship if you can't even talk about them, or if the person's not even willing to have that discussion, because then you're just pushing everything down. It's going to explode eventually. I think this is something that I found from being in a cross-cultural relationship, is around boundaries. If your relationship doesn't have clear boundaries, both individual and mutual, if your boundaries aren't being respected, and if the other person or yourself, depending on, the dynamic of relationship, boundaries are constantly getting tested. It's not healthy or constructive to constantly test your partner's boundaries to see what happens. That's not healthy, and it's not good for you. It's definitely not good for children if they're involved. If you feel like your partner has a massive sense of entitlement. So what I mean by that, it's like things in your relationship are expected. You're expected to do the dishes. You're expected to look after the kids. You have all of these responsibilities that are just expected of you. That's your role in the relationship, and you don't really get to say of it because, your partner's decided that their time is worth more than yours. Sometimes we have gut feelings. I mean, if you think about friendships, high schools, relationships at work, sometimes we have a gut feeling that things aren't okay. And that could be, maybe the very first sign to start looking for red flags. I think that if you're in a relationship that seems one-sided, where, their needs matter, but yours don't. So you find yourself, you're buying them new clothes, you're, making sure all their needs are met, but you're not getting any fulfillment out of that. They're not, maybe doing anything for you, or your needs just aren't even on the table to be talked about. That's a problem. I think there are a lot more, but I think these are the starting ones. These are the ones where, if you're in an established relationship and you're starting to see these things, like, does it mean your partner's like the worst person in the world? Probably not. But it means that you definitely need to start thinking about professional help and seeking support. If you can't have the conversation with them, maybe that third person can help.
Yeah, absolutely.
The person we don't mean mother-in-law. That's not what we mean by this.
No, please do not involve the mother-in-law. That is not happening. You just reminded me.
That's a boundary.
Yeah, boundaries. Please don't cross them. You just reminded me of Everybody Loves Raymond. And I don't know if it's her, but Marie. She's somebody you would not tell your problems to. I also think that when people tell you, when an outsider tells you that I think you guys need help, I think that's a sign when outsiders are telling you that. Or if you have children and, regardless of age, it doesn't matter if they're 5, they're 15, they're 20, they live with you and they don't want to be around you. And you guys are arguing in front of the child, or
fighting all the time, like
fighting all the time.
You guys like each other, like all of those kind of comments.
Yeah,
children are smart, and they'll tell you how they feel in a roundabout way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, I think that maybe this is like a bigger issue as well, but I think about all the times you see a couple and you're maybe concerned about the dynamic, or the sister girl looks really, depressed and sad. How are we supporting her? I think a lot of the time in this individualistic society that we live in, we just go, well, it's not our problem. It's not our table. We don't care. But maybe we need to speak up more. And then when people speak up and say, hey, you guys seem like you're going through a hard time at the moment, maybe instead of getting defensive, we want to have relationships with all the people in our lives where it's safe enough to say, yeah, actually we are.
Yeah. I think that other warning signs are, when you fantasize or imagine yourself with another person or just in another relationship.
Not with them.
Not with them. I mean, that is just, and I mean, if you do it, I don't know. Sometimes people, you check somebody out. I think that's different. But when you're sitting there visualizing what your life
would be like without your partner, that's a sign that things are not okay.
Yes, absolutely. Or, you or your partner not interested in sex. That's another sign that something's not right somewhere. It may not be that your relationship's about to break down, but it's a sign of
an issue with timing around communication. Like, when you're married and you've got kids, or even if you don't have kids, work is a lot, life is a lot. We're surviving a pandemic. Like, maybe that lack of intimacy, whether it's sex or kissing or hugging or affection, that can be a sign that there's a breakdown in communication and conversations need to be had about what's going on. And sometimes that's just saying, hey, I don't feel valued right now, or hey, I'm just having a shit time and I need to talk to you about it, and I'm not feeling heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think, feeling unsure of the future. If you're sitting there like not even knowing where this is heading, whether you have children or not, or if once upon a time you guys used to have an amazing conversation, amazing deep and meaningful conversations, and now you have no conversations with no substance.
The roommate theory, where all of a sudden you're not really married, you're just roommates.
Oh, my heart would break if that happened to
But
me.
the thing is, like, some of these situations, when we take away like abusive situations, the roommate thing, that can be temporary. It can be a lack of communication. It can be, my husband hasn't taken the nappy bin out like 10 times when I've asked him to, and that feeling of, well, does he value me? Like resentment. But these things are all temporary and can be changed. And it's around communication. Open, flexible, honest communication can really help a relationship. But I think what happens is that sometimes it gets so tough that instead of looking for answers or solutions, we just go, I can't be bothered anymore. I'll just pretend it's not happening and ignore it, and then a fight happens or a big argument happens. But there are so many steps you can take before that. It's just that half of them are so like, taboo or stigmatized that we don't talk about what those steps actually are.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much leads me to my next question, or what the basis of this topic was about, of this show was about, was why don't people go to relationship counseling? And there are enough relationship counselors out there. There are enough support out there that can help you, and people avoid it like it's a plague or something. And I just think, why are you avoiding it? Like, I mean, there are many reasons I think people do, one being sometimes I think people prefer to talk to their friends and their family rather than going to a psychologist. And I mean, but you're putting the burden on people that don't really need to have that.
It's really hard to be subjective when it's someone you love. If my sister comes to me and says, oh, my husband's a dickhead, he does this and this and this, well, she's my sister. I'm going to be like, you know what? I agree with you. It can be hard to be subjective when you're talking to someone who cares about you. And this is why, the ideas of mother-in-laws and going to your parents, like, you should always be open with your parents, especially in regards to if the situation is unsafe. But sometimes, depending on your relationship and your boundaries with them, it can actually probably make the relationship a little bit worse, depending on what the issues are. Because moms always side with their sons, and that's just how it works.
Oh, that is such a, I'm sure this is not like only an Indian thing, but it is such an Indian thing. Like, they'll always side their sons, even if they're wrong, they're right. And you see this in Bollywood movies. See how Bollywood lives?
Exactly that.
Oh God. I personally know, I've never been to a relationship counselor, but I personally know when it's come to seeing psychologists, I've had bad experiences. And sometimes it had deterred me from seeing a psychologist again, but other times it's like, well, there are so many, I've just not gone to the right one. So by that token, I think people who need to go to relationship counselors, they think, oh, but I had a bad experience with, a counselor 10 years ago. Or
my friend's cousin's brother had a bad experience, so I'm not going to.
Somebody I have no idea about had a bad experience, therefore I will.
Look, I think that for me, the key deterrence to seeing a relationship counselor is stigma, the cultural implications. What's that word? What will people think?
For my Indian people, log kya kahenge? Hi.
Exactly. What will people think if they find out?
Yeah.
You know, what's the cost involved? If I see a counselor, am I admitting my relationship's failed? Am I admitting I failed? You know, all of these things. And look, they are, you know, it comes down to our self-worth, our values, societal's view on mental health and counselling, and these Hollywood and Bollywood myths of what a relationship looks like. But, you know, sometimes if we take a step back and just make the call, we'll see what the positives are, what actually happens when you see a counsellor. I think that there's, you know, I think for men, there's this misconception that you go into a counselor's office, it's this raging feminist who's going to be like, all men suck. You know, the women is always right. You know, they're going to blame the husband for everything. And then for women, it's going in there being like, you know, I'm going to have to confront these issues that I'm having. I'm going to have to talk to my husband about these things. What happens when I go home? What happens if he doesn't take it seriously? What happens if I do this and it makes my relationship worse? And if you've got kids, what happens to the children if this doesn't work? You know, there are a lot of facets around relationship counselling. And you know, the ideas of what actually happens. But if we never go, then we never know what actually happens.
Yeah. It is a very big cultural thing. I know with Indian culture, they like to keep their problems at home. But if you keep the problems at home, but you still don't talk about it, that problem's not going anywhere. And it's
just
not even
just gets bigger.
Yes, it's just lingering. And I know that a lot of Indian people are like, oh, but I don't want to go and talk to a stranger about my problems. What would they know? I mean, not that they haven't counseled probably another 1,000 people, not that they haven't helped others, but you know, what would they know? Or they think that a non-Indian, like I'm just going to give an Indian example here, because that's the only one I can identify with. They'll think that a non-Indian can't understand them. And I know I felt like that when I went to just a psychologist thinking, oh, psychologists, they're not Indian, they won't get me. But they did. Yeah. And they actually understood, and they made their best effort to understand. So if you're thinking that, oh, they're not the same nationality, they won't understand.
Not all Gories are bad. Like, just putting it out there.
That's right, my girl. That's right. Oh my God. But I think it's also that fear of maybe even making it worse. That if you go to counselling, it might make it worse, or the fear of, you know, what will happen when we get home? Am I going to get in trouble because I brought it up, type of thing?
That's it. And maybe the cost as well. You know, I think that, you know, you say to your husband or your partner, you know, it could be a man going to a woman, like, genders aside, let's go and see a counsellor. You know, not all relationship counsellors are eligible for a Medicare rebate. So you're looking at maybe $150 a session. You go to 5 or 6 sessions, nothing happens, nothing gets better. You know, and that could be that there's no connection with the worker. Maybe the practitioner sucks. You know, maybe it's bigger than counselling. But, you know, that could be a huge deterrent. So it's like, well, I'm not going to keep going if nothing's happening. And that too, I think. That's it. And the thing is, it is understanding the expectation of counsellors. I think that being a trauma counsellor, we often have, I've talked about this with my colleagues, is that, you know, people assume that when you go to a trauma counsellor that we have some magic box that we give you and that all of a sudden all of your trauma's gone. And then after 2 or 3 sessions, you just walk out and you're fine now. That definitely doesn't work like that. You have to do the work yourself. We just give you the ideas and the knowledge and the tips on how to do that, but you have to actually do it. And I think with relationship counselling, it's the same. Like, you go to the relationship counsellor, you hash things out, you learn some, you know, solutions or ways to deal with different situations, but you don't they don't actually fix the problem for you per se.
Because you have to implement what you've been told in that session, like and
you have to want it. You know, like, it's both people have to want to change and they have to want to work at being together. Just because you go and you have like this session where you talk for an hour a week, it doesn't actually solve the problems if you don't, what is the word? Instill the change in the actual relationship itself. Yeah.
I sometimes think that people don't want to actually own up to their mistakes, especially if they know. I think deep down, sometimes you know where you messed up, and just to admit it is like, reducing your ego. It's like your ego is this high, but if you have to admit that you had a fault, it's suddenly you can't handle it. And I think that's probably maybe one of the biggest reasons why people don't go, is having to look at yourself in the mirror. You have to look at yourself in the mirror, be critical of what a person who
acknowledging that we all have shitty behaviors.
Yeah.
And we all do things that are not always okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know definitely for me, one of the biggest wake up calls, you know, when I've gone to counselling is that you have to acknowledge, actually, I'm responsible for my own actions.
Yeah.
There might be things or experiences that I've had that have, you know, made me think or do the things that I do, but I'm responsible for taking that action. I'm responsible for healing myself. And if I mess up and I make a mistake, I'm also responsible for acknowledging that. And being accountable to yourself, I think, is the hardest form of accountability.
Ooh, it is. It is hard. I mean, hey, I've done it. So many of us have had to do it.
Human, you know, it's just about, you know, we have to, as we get older, be accountable.
Yeah, and literally look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, so I messed up here for whatever reason. You can't keep justifying it and just try and change. But if there's no changed behavior, then, you know, it feels as if the person doesn't even want to be there. And speaking of another reason why a person doesn't want to go, addictions, you know, alcohol addiction, smoking, I think maybe they have a fear that they might have to give up what they hold so close to them. The drinking, the smoking,
like dual diagnosis, you know, like you know, when you go to a relationship counselor, I think that sometimes you also are it is put into a perspective for you that we have our own things to work on. Yeah. For some people, that might be a trauma response. It might be substance misuse, might be gambling, it might be, you know, sex addiction. There are, you know, a plethora of things it could be. But the relationship counselor, again, is not going to fix those things for you. They might identify how they affect the relationship, but you've got to be responsible. And like you said, like not everyone wants to do that. No. Not everyone's ready to do it.
No. Indian people, I am looking at you right now because you are guilty of this. I'm sorry. I have seen this too many times in my culture, them not wanting to get help, them thinking that they are right. A lot of Indian men are like that. They think they're right when they're in that relationship. They make the call, they bring the bread, they don't want to see a counselor. They think nothing wrong.
I mean, I think it's entrenched. I think it's this idea of masculinity.
Yes.
And their role within a relationship, and that doesn't I mean, this is a gender issue in terms of like throughout all cultures. It's just more obvious from the outside, I think, within some specific Indian cultures, such as Punjabi culture.
Yes.
But I think it is entrenched, this idea of what a man's role is in a relationship. A lot of these men have grown up seeing their fathers as providers, and that's their main role. You know, the mum stays at home with the auntie and the grandma and everyone looks after the kids. They raise the kids. That's the role. And in a modern society, in a Western society, that's not always possible. I mean, women have to work now. Like it's not always a choice. Shit's expensive, man. Like my kid needs an iPad for school. Like that costs money. We have to work, and being able to change the way you've been brought up, that's really hard. It can be done, but you have to want to learn a different way and start to see yourself and how you fit in the world differently. And that comes back to accountability, and that's a huge task.
It's a cycle. It's actually a cycle of breaking down. This comes with generational trauma. Not seeing a psychologist, not seeing a counselor, not getting help for your marriage. You know, you see your parents fighting but living together. So you think, oh, well, you know, my parents lived together through this crap time and they argued and that's fine. So they just think that's the normality of a marriage, and it's not. It's just we have resources now. We have come out of our shell now, and we are now speaking about the traumas that our parents and their parents have gone through. The time is different, and I think, as you said, it is a masculinity thing, and it's a generational thing. It's passed down as is everything pretty much.
And I think the thing is too is if we don't talk about it, that it doesn't change. And you know, I find when it comes to trauma, intergenerational trauma, you know, a lot of this stuff, it is women who are having these conversations. And I found with my interactions in Punjabi community is that it's women who want to have these conversations, but in actual fact, it's men that need to.
Yes.
It's, normalizing talking about mental health. It's normalizing talking about the stress of the financial burdens that comes with the ideas of being the perfect man or the perfect husband. These conversations need to be had with all men, because that's how we change. Women and feminism came out by having conversations about what was wrong, what was not going well for us, and us being able to join together to fight against oppression. Men need to do the same when it comes to, talking about and normalizing mental health and that generational sort of stigma and stereotypes around masculinity.
It's normalizing seeking help, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Whether it's mental health, whether it's, you're into a financial crisis and you need somebody to help you get out of your debt.
Health, education, you hate your job, you're unhappy in your marriage. Like, normalize having those conversations. Yes,
and helping each other, regardless of gender, regardless of age. It's literally asking for help. So
sorry, 5 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. I have a box with pencils in it for my stand. Yeah.
So with cross-cultural relationships, I mean, you're in one, I've been in one, and that is another reason why sometimes you need that sort of counselling. What are your thoughts on that?
So look, I've met a lot of people over the years now who are in cross-cultural relationships, and I think there are a lot of challenges. And I think for me personally, the challenges are harder when there are two distinct cultures. So I'm very proud of my Aboriginality. That's something that is really important to me. Cultural practice and cultural values. Aboriginal culture is traditionally quite a matriarch society. The values of where men and women sit are significantly like the polar opposite of Punjabi culture.
Yeah.
And that's definitely been a learning curve for both me and my partner. Whilst Sikhism promotes equality within genders, I would say that Indian culture as a whole does not. So it's a learning about the different values that we have and different cultural identities that we have, and finding a way to balance and blend that. And also, oh my God, now the dog's going to knock the phone off. Acknowledging what's important and how you respect each other. It comes down to mutual respect. I think it's also understanding the differences, the feelings that can come with loss of identity. Do I give up my culture to make way for yours? We're raising kids together. How do we share both of these cultures? A really good friend of mine named AJ, she talks about decolonization and things like that. She talked about what it's like for two people who have struggled with oppression and attempted colonization by Western culture to be together, and the trauma that we carry from that. And again, a whole nother issue, but all of these things play a part in cross-cultural relationships, particularly when there are two distinct cultures. I think that perhaps it's a little bit easier when one person is Caucasian or white, because they're not bringing as... Grab whatever you want out of the fridge, that's fine. Sorry. Because they're not bringing such a distinct cultural value. Yeah. Sorry. They're not bringing such a distinct culture with them. But for me, like, my culture is so important. It makes up a huge part of my identity, just like any Punjabi or Indian person.
Yeah.
It's who you are. You can't escape that. I guess for me, if I'm being like brutally honest, the hardest challenge for me is family, and how family values and relationships work. I come from a broken home, so my relationship with my family is very different. Whereas my partner has a very strong relationship with his parents. They have a whole different way of interacting with each other. And sometimes that's really hard for me because I've got really strong boundaries and for me to function, I need for them to be adhered to. But my boundaries don't agree or translate in what's expected in that culture. They're almost considered as like a rude thing. Like, for example, I'm not keen for my mother-in-law to come in my room. Like, it's not something that I can cope with. I can't cope with it.
But that's what they do in Indian movies.
But, you know, my mother-in-law wants to come in. She wants to make my bed. She wants to put my clothing away. And I want to be grateful for that. But I come from a place where that's not really an accepted practice. So being able to understand the cultural differences and find a way to live within it. A friend of mine, she's married to a Punjabi, she said to me, sometimes you have to understand the way in which Punjabi mother-in-laws interact with you. It's their way of showing love. You know, 9 times out of 10, it's not a malice thing. It's not a cruel thing. It's just the way that they still live in a collective society. We don't. We live in an individualist society where our interests and what we want dominate our way of thinking. Whereas in Indian culture, it's about what everyone needs. So when she's coming in to make my bed or put my clothes away, she's doing it because she wants to help. She's not doing it to like invade my personal space.
No.
But it's taken me 7 long years and 7 years of arguments and disagreements to be able to work that out and be able to realize that there are far more things, you know, to worry about than that particular issue. But it takes time, and you have to be able to have those conversations. You know, cross-cultural relationships, they're hard work. They require patience, compromise, understanding, communication, flexibility, and mostly the ability to know when you need help. And that, for us, is professional help. Like, sometimes you need to go and see a counselor. You need to sit down with someone who's not in your bubble and say, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, what can you advise us to do? How do we communicate better?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the biggest problems with different cultures getting together. If they themselves don't have that mutual understanding, but they want to be together, sometimes you need that third person to sort of mediate. And we have very rich cultures, you know, our cultures, they are so rich, and, you know, they require a lot of patience and a lot of time.
They're not something that can be like left behind. And I mean, like no dissing on the white people, but, you know, I feel like if you are from a Western ideology that doesn't have that cultural background, it's easier to adapt the values and beliefs of someone else's culture. Whereas I can't do that because I have my own culture and I have my own cultural beliefs and my own cultural strengths that are dominant within my identity, just as my partner does. And I couldn't expect him to just be like, okay, well, these are all the things I don't like about your culture, just give them up now and adopt mine. So I think that is a challenge. And I think that the one thing I'd like to say is that love just doesn't magically conquer all. You know, sometimes things are too hard, and that's okay. But you need to then seek professional help and make decisions based on like the future, not just how you feel about someone. You can love someone and you can love them with all your heart. It doesn't mean you can be in a relationship with them. Because if we can't let go of our values and beliefs or make room to understand other people's, a relationship will never work, regardless of how much you love someone.
No, it is hard. It requires, I feel like a cultural relationship requires a lot more understanding than one that is of the same culture. Even that is so much work, but when it's cross cultures, it's like, you know, trying to understand and relate your culture to the culture of your partners, it can be hard.
Like, you know, when I think about growing up in Australia, or what it must have been like, you know, growing up in India, like my partner didn't come here until he was, I think, 19 or 20.
Yeah.
It's a whole different world. Like the school systems, the relationship with parents, the expectations, everything is different. The laws are different. The societal norms, the structures, everything is different. So you can't, you know, I might not agree with some of those things, but I can't say to him, like, because I'm Western, I've decided that's all wrong and you need to change. Like, you have to show compassion and understanding and say, you know, like, there are things we don't agree on and that's okay. And again, don't think I did this overnight, 7 long years. Ladies and gentlemen, 7 long
Very
years
long time.
to be able to even say that out aloud.
No, it is very hard. There's a lot of men and women who are in cross-cultural relationships who they want to be together, but yet it's hard. And relationship counseling, go and learn about each other's I was going to say go and learn about each other's counseling. Whoops, that's not what I meant. Go and learn about each other's culture and broaden your horizons.
That's it. And I guess I'll leave you guys with these points. Like when you go to counseling, you don't go there to tear each other down. You think about what brought you together in the first place. What is the positives in your relationship? How do different cultures or different situations impact you both as a couple and individually?
Yeah.
How do you balance your beliefs and values? How do you see your future? What do you want from the relationship? And if you have kids, what values and beliefs do you want to instill in your children when they grow up? These are the kind of questions they ask you. That relationship counseling is about trying to make things better. It's not about, trying to tear each other down.
I just quickly want to point out on the effects that bad relationships have on children when they're at home. Children start acting out as a way to express how they feel when they see both mother and father fighting. That they have aggression, they go through depression, anxiety when they're seeing their parents fighting, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to handle it, especially when they're young or whatever age they are. You can't expect your child to fight your battles, and I've noticed that a lot of parents, they bring the oldest child in to mediate the problem. And it's
just not okay. It's not okay for your child's development. It's not okay for your child's mental health.
No.
Children have no place being involved in their parents' relationships. And, I think as a parent, who has had issues within my relationship, is that I need to remember that I'm modeling what is a healthy relationship. I'm modeling all of this to my children. So they're going to look to me and to my relationship to decide what kind of relationship they might want to have in the future. My relationship with my husband is going to affect their relationship with themselves and how they see the world and how they decide that they want to get treated in a relationship as an adult. And from coming from a childhood where, my mom did not have healthy relationships. She had very unsafe, violent and abusive relationships. It's taken me a long time to recover from that. A quote that always goes around the internet and, a lot of people who I really look up to have said is, don't give your children a childhood they have to recover from. And I think that starts with our relationship with our partner, whether that's your child's father, mother, stepfather, just parent, how we interact with our intimate partner when we have kids. That is what is going to be the core of their development and their identity, because everything they do, they're watching us. They're watching. And I guess that's something to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes these kids, they don't want to go home. They'd rather be anywhere else but home. And that's not a safe environment. And I've got the number on the screen for anybody who's, between, I don't think 5-year-olds have, Facebook, but anybody up to the age of 25, if you guys need to call the kids helpline, call them, speak to somebody. If it's not that, and you need to speak to somebody from, there's domestic violence going on at home, you can call as well. You can call the National Sexual Assault Line.
Feel free to send us a PM or message, and we can definitely point you in the direction of support if you need it. I'm in Victoria, but I'm pretty well versed on a lot of the services throughout the country.
I'm in New South Wales, and once again, same here. And there's too much effect on children when it comes to these things, and I think that's one of the main reasons why people should seek relationship counseling, is the effect on their kids. Going to school, then you can't expect them to get A+ and 100% on tests while you guys are having a domestic at home arguing. You can't expect so highly of your kids. And I think that happens ever so often, especially with Indian children. The parents are fighting like cats and dogs at home, and they're supposed to go to school and get the best mark. And if they don't, they get in trouble.
and this trauma is something that affects you into an adulthood. Exposure to relationship issues, whether it's as serious as family violence or just constant disagreements, lack of intimacy in a relationship, or the roommate situation. This affects the relationships we have as an adult, how we treat our partners, how we treat ourselves, how we view ourselves and our self-worth. So I think to quote Hilltop Hoods, 2 happy homes is better than one that suffers. And I think that that's very true. I think that sometimes we can try and the relationship doesn't work. That's okay. When there are children at home, sometimes the best thing we can do for them is walk away. Doesn't mean we have to hate our ex-partner. It just means that we have to raise the kids separately and together at the same time. I mean, work on a relationship, but if it's not working, it's not working, and that's okay. I don't think there should be shame in divorce. Do I think it should be the first option? Probably not. But I think it's okay to have discussions about what your relationship looks like, and it does not have to look like the societal norms of a relationship. It can be whatever works for you. And I learned that from my friend AJ. I mean, she talks about relationships being a couple who live in 2 separate households, or whatever works for you. Sometimes we have to look outside the box, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think I've seen negative relationships in my life, and sometimes it almost turns you off wanting to be in a relationship because you get scared, and that's not something that you want to have on your kid. Like, I don't want to be scared. I don't want my child to be scared of being in a relationship, thinking that love doesn't exist. This is not what love is, arguing and fighting all the time. That is not love. And I think, people end up being scared to have children and have commitment when they see
they end up settling for bad relationships because they're like, well, it was okay for my mom, or it was okay for my dad, or it was okay for my parent, so that I'm going to have that same kind of relationship. So, if maybe you are in an unhealthy relationship, or your relationship's struggling, as your children get older and it's age appropriate, talk to them about that time. Talk about that you got help, or this is why you separated, or this was what was going on for you, obviously in a really age appropriate, non-traumatic way. But having those conversations with your children, especially if they're adults, provides them with insights around what a healthy relationship looks like. And I think there is absolutely no shame in saying, actually, my relationship with your other parent wasn't healthy. And, I know that now, and these are the steps we've taken to make that better. Because then at least they know that you're aware, they don't repeat those same mistakes.
Absolutely. If anybody is going through, any type of separation or fighting in the house, I'm talking to you parents right now. Please do not involve your children. That they are not there to parent you. You can't parent the parent. Like it doesn't work like that. And too many kids are
responsibility. To do that. It's just not.
No.
Our responsibility as parents, our children's responsibility has nothing to do with, our relationship with each other as parents.
No, absolutely. How do you think parents can be there for their children during times like this? I would be, if this was me going through something, I would be telling my children, or my partner, like, let's have rules about what we talk about in front of our kids and what we're not going to discuss, how we behave in front of the kids. I think that is something that needs to be balanced.
Is don't fight in front of your kids. Have the conversation after they've gone to sleep. Try and avoid yelling. Obviously, there are times where this doesn't always happen because we're only human, and humans with trauma of any kind, it can be really hard to regulate yourself, and I'm putting my hands up as one of those people. But try and instill those things, like, be in a position where you can say, let's have this conversation later when the kids are asleep. Normalize saying to your children, mum and dad had a fight and we yelled at each other and that wasn't okay. Yeah. And also be brave enough to acknowledge when your child needs support that isn't from you and it isn't from a family member. Just as we're talking about relationship counselling, if your child needs support, or you're going through a separation, or they've been exposed to, some really unhealthy behaviours, seek support for them, just as you would seek support for yourself. Yes. There are lots of great services designed for children, and we can definitely, supply anyone with any links for those services.
Yes, absolutely. I was going to say about, encouraging your child to see somebody, whether it's a school, contacting a GP, whatever it is. You need to be there for your children because they're modeling your behavior. They're seeing what you're doing when it's not.
Never ask. Sorry, you go.
That's it. That's it. If
Never
it's
ask your children to lie for you. If you have to ask your child to lie about your behavior or your partner's behavior, that is a huge red flag. Seek help immediately.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, and also, don't make your child pick sides. How many times do we hear about this?
Don't get them involved at all. I don't think it's good for their overall well-being, their life and future trajectory. I think that, as adults, we have a responsibility to the little people we bring into this world to provide them with safe, secure and nurturing environments. And that means keeping them, where possible, out of our relationship problems and dynamics. It's no good to expose them to any sort of really unhealthy relationship dynamics. It affects their development in every area.
Oh, absolutely. No, and no child should ever have to. They shouldn't have to go through these things because how their brain is still developing, and that their brain development gets affected at the time when they're seeing all these things. And this leads me to my final point. Where can people get help? I know that, if you're at university, there are counselling sessions at university that can help you. There's also an employee assistance program at certain places. They can actually help you as well.
The best place probably to start, if you're up to it, is talk to your GP. They can definitely refer you to a psychologist where you can, some have Medicare rebate eligible for couples, but even if it's just for yourself, there are definitely a lot of services like Relationship Australia, which is national, DV Connect, 1-800-RESPECT. For the men out there, there's Men's Line, Men Referral Service. There are lots of services available, from Google, which will direct you. We've got a few lists here of numbers, but remember, there's no shame in seeking help, whether you're, you feel like you're maybe the person doing the wrong thing or the person doing the right thing. It all starts with reaching out.
Yes, absolutely. There's also, you can go to individual therapy if there are therapy sessions, support groups, and if you need time apart, you need time apart. I mean,
a really good friend of me once told me that sometimes walking away, even temporarily, gives you both the space you need to decide what you actually want from the relationship. And I think that can be really good advice, providing, everything's safe. I think that time apart can be a way to decide what it is you want, to, re-establish your boundaries, and rewrite in a way the rules of your relationship, how you want to be treated, how you want to treat the other person, what the expectations are. People will say to you, I don't believe in expectations. Well, everyone has expectations, and it's a conversation we need to have, especially if we're in a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that pretty much covers it for today, I reckon. Yes. It's just pretty much, in closing, I would just say there is an issue. A, don't bring your children into it, but B, seek help. There is no shame, and that shame stigma, you need to get rid of that shame stigma. Chuck it out the door. If you need help, if your marriage is important, that's what you need to start fixing. If people are going to say things, so what? What are they going to do? They're going to talk, and then what happens? Nothing. So
that's it. And a good thing to remember is, again, another person very, very dear to my heart said to me that, there's nothing wrong with, taking up free rent in someone else's head. If someone's thinking about you or worrying about your relationship, well, you know what? They're spending an awful time thinking about you, and they should probably be thinking about themselves. So, we need to sort of let go of that stigma of shame and worrying about what people think, because at the end of the day, we can only live our own lives for ourselves. And sometimes taking that first step to seek help, it's not a negative, it's a positive.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. It couldn't get worse. I just don't believe that going to a counselor or a therapist could get worse. I mean, you're going to learn something, but you need to, I think more than anything, you need to be open-minded. You need to be open-minded enough to go? I mean, how much is your marriage worth to you, you know, or your relationship, not just marriage here, it's your relationship.
And as a counsellor, you know, as a human service practitioner, we just want the best for everyone. Like I want to help people. I want to give them and share the knowledge that I've been lucky enough and privileged enough to learn. You know, the more healthy relationships, the more we can talk about mental health, we're all better off for it. You know, and I think that's really important to remember. Like, you know, very few counsellors are, you know, we don't make an awful lot of money, so we're not in it for that. So
No, that's absolutely right. Wow. That was amazing. I hope, you know, any of you people who are watching right now or will be watching soon, you know, I hope this has helped you in some way to identify maybe any red flags that you might have in your relationship, or to identify where you might be going wrong. I'm all for the kids and children's trauma, and I feel like I need to say this one more time. Please do not involve your children in your mess. You know, it's not their fault. They don't need to be involved. Instead, let them go see a psychologist. Let them go get help. There is no shame. You know,
get help for yourself. I mean, I hope anyone, if you're watching this, that, you know, this will maybe help you have some conversations with yourself and anyone around you who you feel like you're, you know, having a rough time within a relationship. I think that it's really important. You know, hopefully spark some conversational topics for you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, you have been watching Real and Raw Conversations with Shalina. Tonight we were talking about relationship counselling and the taboos, featuring the lovely LJ Kaur. This video will be continuously on Facebook and YouTube, and it'll be there for you to come back and visit. But for now, thank you for tuning in. This was episode number 1 with plenty to come. If you want to be a guest, send me an email. If you want to subscribe for more, all you have to do is follow me on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, whichever one, take your pick. Where can they find you, LJ? If they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I don't really have any like social media things, but I'll definitely work on it for the next episode.
Yes, this is not the last you've seen of her as well, okay? She'll be back many times because me and her have so much knowledge so much
couldn't think of a better person to talk to.
I know, right? I feel like I can just sit here and talk to you for like hours and hours. But for now, thank you everybody for joining in. I hope this was of some value and substance. Shalina can't English, for you tonight. And thank you to LJ for joining me and accompanying me in this episode. I'm still so excited over it.
Take care, everyone.
Any final closing messages that you have to anybody watching?
Let's decolonize and destigmatize mental health.
Ooh.
Most important thing.
I'm not even going to add anything to that because that was just so perfect. So see you later, everybody. Good night. Take care, and leave your comments below. Send us a PM if you need any help. Or make sure you contact 1-800-RESPECT or 000 if you are in danger. And I will see you next time. You have been watching Real and Raw Conversations with Shalina, and tonight's special guest who will be joining us over and over again was LJ Kaur. So good night. See you later. And thank you very much for joining us. See ya.